In 1912, a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich acquired a manuscript from a Jesuit collection near Rome. It was small enough to hold in two hands. Its cover was plain. Its pages were parchment. And inside, almost every page looked like evidence from a civilization that had misplaced its own instruction manual. There were plants no botanist could confidently name. Circular diagrams filled with stars. Zodiac wheels surrounded by tiny human figures. Fold-out pages that opened into strange networks of towers, pipes, pools, and 9 circular islands. And then there was the writing. Line after line of smooth, practiced script. Not random scratches. Not hesitant copying. The hand moves like someone who knows exactly what they are saying. But nobody else does. The manuscript is now catalogued at Yale as Beinecke MS. Manuscript 408. Yale's catalog describes it as a scientific or magical text in an unidentified language or cipher, apparently based on Roman minuscule characters. For more than a century, historians, linguists, cryptographers, and professional code breakers have circled the same question. Is this a code? A lost language? A hoax? A private shorthand? A book of medicine? A book of astrology? A joke played on a wealthy emperor? Or something more ordinary and therefore harder to recognize? This episode is not about solving the Voynich manuscript. It is about why a solution has been so difficult to prove. This object exists. It is not a forgery, not a legend, not a story passed down from someone who claims to have seen it once. It sits today in a climate-controlled vault at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where it has been catalogued since 1969 as Manuscript 408. Roughly 240 pages of treated calfskin, hand-bound in vellum, weighing less than a single hardcover novel. Anyone with a Yale Library account and a credible reason can request to see it. What it is, physically, is a quarto codex of 102 folios of vellum, folded and stitched, the kind of binding that was already old by the time the parchment was new. Nearly every page carries an illustration in iron gall ink and colored washes, green, blue, dull red, brown. 6 pages are missing. Several others were rebound at some later date out of order. Modern scholars divide what survives into 6 sections by what the illustrations seem to depict. Plants, more than 100 of them, drawn with careful attention to roots, flowers, and stems, none of which have been confidently matched to any known species. Stars and zodiacal wheels, with small human figures clustered around the edges. A section of small nude figures in connecting tubes and pools, sometimes called the biological section for want of a better label. Circular cosmological diagrams that resemble maps of something, though of what is disputed. Pages of illustrated jars and labeled roots, resembling a pharmaceutical index. And a final section scholars call the recipes, continuous text with small stars in the margins, no illustrations, denser than anything else in the book. The book appears organized. The organizing principle is unreadable. In 2009, the University of Arizona's Accelerator Mass Spectrometry Laboratory took 4 samples from the parchment itself and dated them. The result was a range, 1404 to 1438, with 95% confidence. The vellum is real medieval material and it fits the period. The dating fixes the skin, the parchment on which the text is written. The ink could in theory have been applied later. But the ink and parchment age together closely enough that mainstream scholarship places the writing in the same first half of the 15th century. So there is one settled fact and one open question. The settled fact, a medieval European parchment book, real, physical, probably made between 1404 and 1438. The open question, what is in it? The manuscript's known history is partly solid and partly fog. In 1666, a physician named Johannes Marcus Marci, rector of Prague University, wrote a letter to Athanasius Kirchhoff in Rome. Marci enclosed the manuscript and asked for a translation. Kirchhoff was the most famous polyglot scholar in Europe, celebrated for his claimed expertise in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. If anyone could read the book, the thinking went, Kirchhoff could. In the same letter, Marci passed on a story he had been told, that the manuscript had once belonged to Emperor Rudolph II of Bohemia, who had paid 600 gold ducats for it and believed it was the work of the 13th century English philosopher Roger Bacon. That claim is important, but it is not the same thing as evidence. It is a report inside a letter from one Bohemian doctor writing in 1666, passing on what someone else had said about what an emperor may have done, about a book whose origins were already obscure when Marci held it. Some facts are objects. Some facts are documents. Some facts are claims inside documents. They do not all carry the same weight. Kirchhoff, for his part, never replied, or at least left no surviving reply. The manuscript fell silent again. It surfaced, roughly 2.5 centuries later, in the library of a Jesuit college at Frascati outside Rome. It was there that Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish-born rare book dealer working out of London and New York, discovered it in 1912 and purchased it from the college. After Voynich's death, the manuscript passed to his widow Ethel, then to a family associate named Anne Nill, then to the rare book dealer H.P. Kruse. In 1969, Krause donated it to Yale. That modern chain, Frascati, London, New York, New Haven, is well documented and traceable. Everything before Marci's 1666 letter is, at best, a claim with a single source. A hoax would explain why nobody can read it. It would not explain all of it. The script is fluent. Researchers who have analyzed the text find a consistency that looks less like random invention and more like a working system. The same letters appear in roughly predictable positions. Word initial and word final patterns differ in the way natural languages differ. Some words appear to be reserved for particular sections, appearing frequently in the botanical pages, but rarely or never in the recipes. The illustrations, strange as they are, show no signs of carelessness or improvisation. The manuscript also required considerable expense, high-quality vellum, iron gall ink, colored pigments, and sustained labor across hundreds of pages. Expensive hoaxes exist. They have always existed. But a hoax theory has to explain why someone would create hundreds of pages of apparently structured script in a rich and internally consistent visual world with no obvious audience and no surviving payoff of any kind. A lost language would also explain why nobody can read it. But the manuscript has no confirmed parallel. There is no bilingual key, no Rosetta Stone, no second document written in the same system, no known community of readers anywhere in the historical record. A lost language, without any other trace of itself, is a difficult thing to propose and a harder thing to verify. A cipher is the most tempting answer because it makes the manuscript feel like a solvable puzzle. A cipher has a key. Find the key, and the thing opens. But a cipher still needs a language underneath it. If the Voynich text is enciphered, what language is being hidden? Latin? German? Hebrew? And what method was used? Every proposed cipher solution encounters the same problem. It produces one convincing-looking phrase and then collapses when applied to the rest of the book. What makes this harder is what the text does statistically. Researchers who have run frequency analysis on the Voynich writing find patterns consistent with natural language. The distribution of word frequencies follows the same heavy-headed curve found in English, Latin, Arabic, and Mandarin, a relationship known as Zipf's law, in which a small number of words account for most appearances and the rest trail off sharply. Word initial and word final letters behave differently from letters in the middle, in the same way English consonants cluster at the edges of words and vowels fill the centers. Short tokens repeat in positions that function like grammatical particles. These patterns are difficult to produce deliberately across 240 pages. They are also difficult to fake systematically with a random substitution cipher. And there is one more layer. In the 1970s, a researcher named Prescott Currier identified two distinct statistical profiles in the manuscript. different enough that Courier classified them as separate scribal styles or possibly separate registers of the same system. Scholars now call them Courier A and Courier B. They cluster differently across the manuscript sections. This means the book may not be a single homogeneous text at all. It may be a compilation written by two different hands, or it may reflect two different modes of the same underlying system. A theory that accounts for one section still has to account for the other. The Voynich manuscript has attracted serious, credentialed attempts at decipherment for more than a century. Athanasius Kirchhoff, the 17th century scholar Marcy turned to, is not known to have produced any reading of the text. Voynich himself believed the manuscript was Roger Bacon's work and spent the rest of his life trying to confirm that attribution. He never did. In the 1940s and 50s, William Friedman, one of the architects of American military cryptanalysis, the man whose team broke the Japanese purple cipher during the Second World War, organized a private research group that spent years on the manuscript. Friedman eventually concluded that the Voynich text might represent an artificial philosophical language constructed from a logical grammar rather than a cipher applied to a natural language. He never published a formal solution, and the group disbanded without one. In the computer era, the attempts accelerated. Statistical analysis, frequency tables, neural network probes, machine translation experiments. Each new generation of computational tools has been turned on the manuscript, and each has produced findings that are interesting and inconclusive in roughly equal measure. The pattern is consistent. A researcher isolates a section. They find something that fits a hypothesis, a plant that resembles a known species, a word that maps to a Latin term, a section structure that echoes a known manuscript type. The finding is published or announced. It attracts attention, and then it does not survive contact with the rest of the book. In 2014, a linguist named Stephen Bax circulated a 62-page working paper, self-published on his research website, not submitted to a journal, proposing a partial decipherment of 9 words using a comparative methodology drawn from known illustrated manuscripts of the period. The approach was not peer-reviewed, but it was methodologically careful, and it was credible as far as it went. It was also partial. Bax identified 9 words out of approximately 35,000 word tokens in the manuscript. The reading of the remaining text did not follow. This is not a failure specific to any individual researcher. It reflects the structure of the problem itself. The Voynich manuscript is easy to interpret locally. It is hard to explain globally. One diagram can look anatomical. One plant can look familiar. One sequence of symbols can be mapped to a phrase. One page can support almost any theory. But a solution has to survive the entire book. In 2024, Keegan Breuer and Michel L. Lewis published a paper in Social History of Medicine. Their subject was the manuscript's imagery, and the specific cultural context they proposed was the late medieval European tradition of enciphering knowledge about women's bodies and reproductive medicine. Their argument draws on a 15th century Bavarian physician named Johannes Hartlieb, who wrote explicitly about the need to conceal certain medical knowledge in secret writing. Specifically, knowledge about contraception, abortifacients, and gynecological treatments that the Church considered dangerous to circulate openly in the vernacular. Hartlieb called for secret letters precisely because he worried this information was spreading too widely, too accessibly in plain text. Breuer and Lewis do not claim to have deciphered the text. That is the important part. They argue instead from the visual evidence. The manuscript's biological section, the one with small nude female figures moving through connecting tubes, and the large fold-out known as the rosettes, fit recognizable visual conventions for depicting the body, fluidity, and conception in late medieval medical illustration. On that basis, they propose that the rosette's fold-out represents coitus and conception, and that the manuscript as a whole may have been designed to conceal exactly the kind of reproductive knowledge Hartlieb was worried about. This approach is worth naming precisely because it models something useful. It begins from what can be observed, the images, and moves carefully to a hypothesis about what those images might mean in a specific historical context. It does not begin from the text and claim to read it. It does not present a partial decipherment as a solution. It holds the visual hypothesis and the decipherment question as two separate things and treats them differently. Visual hypothesis, plausible subject matter. Text decipherment, not achieved. Both statements can be true at the same time. A book about women's medicine could still be written in an unbreakable cipher. A book written in a lost language could still contain imagery that fits a known cultural tradition. The two questions do not resolve each other. That distinction is the difference between a theory that advances the conversation and a headline that closes it. The Voynich manuscript survives partly because it sits in a rare position. It is not too empty. An empty mystery, one with no evidence at all, burns out quickly. There is nothing to test, nothing to argue, nothing to return to. The Voynich is not empty. There is a physical object. There are 600 years of documented ownership at one end of the chain and radiocarbon dating at the other. There is a text whose statistical properties behave like a language. There are illustrations detailed enough to generate serious iconographic analysis. There are theories and counter-theories and tests and counter-tests and researchers who have devoted careers to it. But the manuscript is not complete either. No reading has been verified. No parallel text has been found. No community of readers has been identified. No full decipherment has survived review across the entire book. What survives, after more than a century of serious effort, is a cleaner picture of the problem. The parchment is real. Its modern provenance is traceable. Its text has statistical properties consistent with natural language. Its imagery may fit a specific late medieval cultural context. And every proposed solution, hoax, cipher, lost language, private shorthand, constructed philosophical grammar, has had to answer the same quiet question. Does it explain the whole book? None have answered yes, convincingly. The Voynich manuscript is often described as the world's most mysterious book. That is a phrase too large to prove and too easy to repeat. But the smaller claim holds. It is a book that has survived every impatient answer. That, at least, is something.